Imagine a wave of molasses, 25 feet high, rushing through the streets of Boston at 35 miles per hour, destroying everything in its path. Buildings collapse, horses are swept away, and people struggle to escape a sticky brown tsunami. Sounds unbelievable, right? But it actually happened, and today we're diving into the weirdest disaster in American history. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. This wasn't just a bizarre accident. It was a perfect storm of corporate greed, industrial ambition, and a ticking time bomb made of steel and sugar. The story is packed with shocking details, tragic human stories, and legal battles that changed America forever. So grab a seat, maybe not a sticky one, as we pore over the details of Boston's Great Molasses Flood. By 1919, Boston was a powerhouse. Its harbor teemed with ships, its streets buzzed with the energy of a nation on the rise. World War I had just ended, and the city was a critical hub for industry and trade. Factories churned out goods, and the port connected America to the world. But another major event was looming on the horizon: Prohibition. The nationwide ban on alcohol was set to begin in 1920, and companies were scrambling to produce as much as possible before the taps were turned off for good. This is where our main character enters the scene. A colossal steel tank owned by the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company, towering over the city's North End neighborhood. Standing 5 stories high and 90 feet wide, it was built to hold an astronomical 2.3 million gallons of molasses. But why so much molasses? It was the key ingredient for making industrial alcohol and rum. This dark, viscous syrup, imported from the Caribbean, was destined for distilleries to fuel the last great boom before Prohibition. However, there was a sinister secret lurking within the tank's steel plates. Where's a rush job, built quickly and cheaply to meet the booming demand. From the moment it was filled for the first time, the tank groaned and leaked. Rivets popped, and long dark streaks of molasses oozed down its sides. Local residents, mostly Italian and Irish immigrants, would collect the sweet drippings in pails. But they also complained about the ominous sounds coming from the structure. They could hear it groaning and creaking, a constant, unnerving reminder of the immense pressure building inside. The company's response: they dismissed the warnings, patching the leaks with cork and painting the entire tank brown to hide the evidence. It was a ticking time bomb of sticky doom, just waiting for the right moment to detonate. That moment arrived on January 15, 1919. It was an unusually warm day for a Boston winter, with the temperature climbing above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the tank, the cold molasses from a recent shipment began to warm and expand, putting unimaginable stress on the already failing structure. At around 12:30 p.m., without any warning, the city was rocked by a sound that witnesses described as a roar, a thunderclap, and the screech of tearing metal. The tank had burst. A wave of molasses, 25 feet tall at its peak and moving at an estimated 35 miles per hour, erupted into the streets. People tried to run, horses panicked, and buildings were torn from their foundations. Eyewitnesses later described it as a wall of brown death, a terrifying, unstoppable force. The initial blast was so powerful it buckled the elevated train tracks nearby, nearly derailing a passing train. A firehouse was smashed, trapping firefighters inside. The wave picked up debris as it moved, creating a churning, lethal slurry of steel, wood, and bodies. One of the most bizarre facts about the disaster is the physics of it all. Molasses is thick and slow-moving, right? Yes, but the sheer force of 12,000 tons of liquid being released in an instant gave it the destructive power of a battering ram. The wave was dense enough to knock over freight cars, shatter buildings, and carry people and animals for blocks before they had a chance to react. For a few terrifying minutes, the streets of Boston's North End became a literal sticky nightmare, a scene straight out of a horror movie. The air, thick with the sickeningly sweet smell of molasses, was filled with the sounds of chaos and desperation. Behind the wall of molasses were the heartbreaking human stories. The North End was a bustling residential and commercial neighborhood, and at lunchtime, the streets were filled with people. Workers from the Public Works Department were caught eating their lunch when the wave hit. Children playing in the streets were swept away in an instant. Families were torn apart in the chaos. One survivor, Anthony D'Stasio, was picked up by the wave and carried along, watching in horror as his sister was pulled under. He was thrown onto a pile of wreckage, his life saved by a stroke of luck while his sister perished. But amid the tragedy, there were incredible acts of heroism. As the wave slowed and thickened in the cold air, it became a deadly trap, like quicksand. People were stuck up to their waists, struggling to breathe as the molasses constricted around them. Sailors from the USS Nantucket, docked nearby, rushed into the sticky morass to pull victims to safety. Nurses and doctors waded through the knee-deep goo to tend to the wounded. Horses, trapped and terrified, had to be shot by police to end their suffering. In total, 21 people lost their lives, and over 150 were injured. Caught in one of the most surreal and tragic disasters in American history. The immediate aftermath was a scene of utter devastation. The North End looked like a war zone, but one coated in a thick, brown, sticky glaze. As temperatures dropped overnight, the molasses began to harden, making rescue and cleanup efforts even more difficult. Rescuers had to chop through the solidified sugar to free those trapped beneath the wreckage. The cleanup was a monumental task. For weeks, crews used salt water from fireboats to wash the molasses into the harbor, turning the water brown for months. Sand was spread over the streets to absorb the stickiness. But it was a long, grueling process. One of the most enduring and quirky legacies of the flood was the smell. Boston residents claimed that on hot summer days, 4 decades after the disaster, you could still smell the faint, sweet scent of molasses lingering in the North End. The event became a piece of local folklore. A bizarre what-if story told 2 generations of Bostonians. It was a sticky curse that the city couldn't quite wash away. The story of the Great Molasses Flood became a cautionary tale, a dark joke, and a permanent part of the city's identity. As the city cleaned up, the search for answers began. The U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company tried to blame the disaster on anarchists, suggesting a bomb had been used to blow up the tank. But the victims and their families weren't buying it. They filed a massive class action lawsuit, one of the first of its kind in Massachusetts. The legal battle that followed lasted for years, featuring thousands of pages of testimony from experts and eyewitnesses. Ultimately, the court found the company entirely at fault. The investigation revealed that the tank was dangerously underdesigned, with steel walls too thin to hold the immense weight of the molasses. The company had ignored basic safety standards and engineering principles in their rush to profit from the pre-prohibition boom. They were ordered to pay out what would be equivalent to millions of dollars in compensation to the victims and their families. This landmark case set a powerful precedent. It was a sweet disaster that changed how America handles industrial safety, leading to the implementation of stricter government regulations on construction and engineering. No longer could corporations build massive structures without proper oversight and accountability. Let's dive into some more fun, interesting tidbits about this sticky situation. The sheer volume of the flood is hard to comprehend. 2.3 million gallons of molasses. That's enough to fill more than 3.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. When the wave hit, it created a pressure wave of air that was powerful enough to blow windows out of buildings blocks away. The molasses, which is denser than water, settled at the bottom of Boston Harbor, affecting the marine ecosystem for months. And that lingering stickiness wasn't just a myth. For years, everything in the area, from doorknobs to telephone receivers, was said to have a slightly tacky feel. The disaster was so bizarre that for a long time, many people outside of Boston thought it was just an urban legend. So there you have it, A disaster so bizarre it's hard to believe it actually happened. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 was a tragic, strange, and ultimately transformative event. It serves as a sticky reminder of the human cost of corporate negligence and the strange ways in which history can surprise us, too. It's a story that proves that sometimes the most mundane substances can become the most deadly, and that history always sticks with us sometimes, quite literally.